Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. Dust swirled in the heat as recruits stood locked in formation, sweat rolling down their necks under the cruel California sun. Instructor Reyes paced in front of them like a wolf hunting weakness. But the humiliation came from someone else. A tall, arrogant recruit named Dalton shoved a smaller girl backward during drills, sending her crashing to the dirt in front of everyone. "Move faster, sweetheart," he sneered, "or go back home and bake cookies." Laughter erupted from the nearby men. The girl didn't defend herself. She didn't curse. She didn't even look angry. She simply stood up, brushed sand off her uniform, and returned to position with silent calm that felt unnatural. Dalton didn't stop. Every break was another jab, bumping her shoulder, stealing her water bottle, mocking her height. Nobody stepped in. Nobody wanted to become the next target. The girl's name was Alara. She moved quiet, eyes always forward, like nothing got through to her. But something was buried in those eyes, something old, something wounded, something powerful. When Dalton called her Barbie with a rifle, Instructor Reyes didn't react. But he saw Alara's jaw tighten. After lights out that night, footsteps echoed through the barracks. Dalton dragged Alara from her bunk by the collar, slamming her against a locker. "You don't belong here," he growled. "Women slow us down. Marines are warriors, not babysitters." Alara's voice finally broke the silence, low and steady. "Let go." Dalton smirked. "Or what? You gonna cry?" That's when everything shifted. Alara moved with frightening control. She twisted his wrist, dropped him to his knees and released him before anyone could blink. She didn't punch, didn't kick, didn't gloat. Just whispered, "Don't touch me again." Dalton rose slowly, shock shaking his pride. Instructor Reyes had been standing in the doorway, unseen by both of them. His eyes weren't wide from the takedown, but from the flawless combat technique. He had seen that move before. Only one group was trained that way. Only one. Alara walked calmly to her bunk, hiding the shadow of a buried life she never wanted found. The next morning during long-range marksmanship trials, recruits lined up to prove they could hit targets across the ridge. Everyone watched Dalton. Everyone expected him to shine. When Alara stepped to the firing line, Dalton laughed loud enough for the desert wind to hear. But Instructor Reyes didn't laugh. He leaned forward, whispering to himself in disbelief. Because the way Alara held that rifle was the way only one Marine ever had. And that Marine was deadly. The sun hit the ridgeline with a blazing glare as Alara settled behind the rifle. Other recruits squinted through their scopes, struggling against the heat shimmer. But Alara didn't blink. She breathed slow, steady, almost too calm for a first-timer. Dalton snickered loudly from behind the line. Watch her miss the target entirely. A few recruits laughed just to stand on the winning side. Instructor Reyes didn't so much as flinch. His arms crossed tightly, eyes fixed on Alara like she was a puzzle only he could solve. The first shot cracked through the desert air. The bullet sliced the wind and slammed into the farthest steel plate. A perfect hit. The range fell silent. Alara didn't react, didn't look proud, didn't smile. She loaded her second round. Clang. Another direct impact. No hesitation. No drift. No adjustment. She fired again. Clang. Again. Clang. Again. 5 shots, 5 bullseyes, all at a distance that even seasoned Marines struggled with. Dalton's face went pale. Alara stood up, quietly stepping away from the rifle as if nothing unusual had happened. The recruits stared like she had turned invisible and then suddenly returned wearing a different face. Dalton scowled, trying to recover his ego. "Lucky wind," he muttered. "Anyone can hit when..." Reyes cut him off sharply, voice low and dangerous. "Luck doesn't group shots like that." Dalton froze at the tone. Reyes rarely intervened. When he did, someone was about to bleed. Hours later, during chow time, the whispers spread across the base like wildfire. "Did you see her shoot? Nobody hits that clean." She didn't even adjust her scope. Every glance toward Alara came with curiosity, fear, or jealousy. She walked with her tray untouched, eyes down, shoulders slightly tense. She wasn't celebrating her skill, she was hiding from it. But hiding did nothing. Rumors grow where silence lives. That night, as the recruits cleaned weapons, Dalton cornered Alara again. This time his voice wasn't loud, it was trembling. "Who are you?" Alara didn't answer. Dalton shoved her again, desperate to regain power, and she stumbled. Chairs clattered. The room went still. Dalton demanded, "Why are you really here?" Before she could answer, Reyes entered. "Because she earned it. More than you ever will." Every head turned. Dalton stared at Reyes, confused. "You speak like you know her." A beat of silence settled heavy as sand. Reyes' eyes locked with Alara's. She shook her head almost invisibly, begging him not to say it. But he stepped forward anyway. "I trained a sniper once. Best I'd ever seen. Her code name was Ghost Falcon." Gasps rippled through the room. Dalton looked at Alara, horror setting in. Reyes continued, voice low. "And she's standing right in front of you." Years before Camp Pendleton, before the uniform with no stripes and the quiet stare, Alara lived under a different name, a name whispered across battlefields. Ghost Falcon. It wasn't a nickname meant to sound cool. It was earned through fear. She had joined the Marines at 19, not to chase glory but to run from a home filled with violence and silence. She had come from a town where nobody believed in her, where being small meant being stepped on, and where every dream was laughed at before it breathed. The Corps became the first place where she wasn't invisible. Her rise was terrifyingly fast. She saw angles others didn't. Wind patterns, shadows, heartbeat rhythm, every detail her brain captured like a camera. One instructor said she didn't shoot a rifle, she spoke to it. At 21 she was deployed into a classified task force. Her role? Eliminate enemy snipers before they eliminated her unit. Most people never saw her arrive. They only heard her shots echo from nowhere. But every mission left a scar. She knew the faces of those she killed. She memorized them because she believed forgetting them would make her like the monsters they fought. Honor mattered to her. She didn't take shots unless she had no choice. But war doesn't leave heroes untouched. The turning point came during a mission overseas, her team ambushed in a desert village. Civilians caught in the crossfire. Children crying. She neutralized 6 hostiles before they reached her men. Her final shot saved her commander, but it cost her something no metal could repair. A young girl, no older than 12, watched Alara from a balcony, saw the body of her armed father hit the floor, and screamed in rage and grief. That moment rewrote Alara's soul. Being the best no longer felt like winning. She transferred out, refusing promotions, refusing honors. Reports said, emotional fatigue. Truth was deeper, she no longer wanted to be a weapon. She disappeared from the sniper program, vanished from high-level deployments, and re-enlisted under her real name to blend in as a normal recruit. She wanted peace, anonymity, maybe redemption someday. She thought she could train without killing again. She thought she could become small enough to be unnoticed. But fate has a cruel sense of direction. Instead of being left alone, her silence attracted a bully, Dalton, and the cycle of her life started repeating. The humiliation she endured at Camp Pendleton wasn't weakness. She was trying to bury Ghost Falcon forever. But every shove, every insult, every challenge dug her identity back up like a grave being pried open. As Alara lay in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, she whispered one hurting question into the quiet. Why can't the past stay dead? Morning drills hit harder than usual, not because the workouts changed but because every recruit now knew who Alara really was. Some stared with awe, others with fear. A few whispered prayers before training, as if standing near her meant death might hear their name. Alara hated it. She had worked so hard to disappear, and now every breath she took reminded her that fade into the crowd was no longer possible. Dalton watched her too, but not with fear. With burning humiliation. The worst thing for a fragile ego is being exposed. And Alara hadn't meant to humiliate him, but she had. His pride demanded revenge. During sparring drills, Dalton took a training accident too far. He slammed Alara with all his weight, pinning her neck onto the mat. When she gasped for air, he punched her ribs, not a jab, a full hit. The instructors didn't see it. But the recruits did. The room froze, waiting for Alara to explode. But she didn't. She didn't fight back. She didn't break Dalton's arm, though she easily could have. She simply rolled away, stood up, and walked off the mat. Dalton smiled like he'd won. That afternoon, Reyes called her to his office. He sat behind his desk, hands folded, face carved with frustration. Why are you letting him touch you? She didn't answer. Ghost Falcon doesn't retreat, he pressed. Ghost Falcon doesn't walk away. She kept her eyes on the floor. I'm not Ghost Falcon anymore. But he's pushing you until you become her again, Reyes growled. And when that happens, someone is going to end up in the hospital, or worse. Alara shook her head, voice trembling but firm. I'm not hurting anyone ever again unless I have no choice. Reyes leaned back, searching her eyes. He thinks your silence means weakness. Elara whispered, it means I'm trying to live. That answer broke something in Reyes, admiration and heartbreak in equal measure. Later that evening, Dalton called a group of recruits behind the gym. His tone was venom. She's not special. She's a fraud. Sniper or not, nobody stays a legend. Tonight, I'm putting her back in her place. Who's in? A few insecure followers nodded, desperate to stand with the loudest voice. They weren't looking for truth, they were looking for belonging. That night, while Elara sat alone on the barrack steps staring at the desert horizon, 5 shadows approached. Dalton stood front center. Get up, he demanded. We're settling this. Elara didn't move. I don't want to fight. Dalton leaned down until she could feel his breath. Then I'll make you. He didn't notice Reyes watching from the distance. Or the look in Elara's eyes, the look she prayed never to wear again. The fight about to happen wouldn't stay a secret. The moment Dalton grabbed her shoulder, something inside Elara snapped. Not anger, not ego, but survival. She jerked away, but 3 recruits circled her, blocking escape. They weren't just following Dalton, they were feeding off his rage. The desert wind howled across the training yard, kicking sand around their boots like a warning. Elara's voice was calm but shaken. Walk away. All of you. Please. Dalton laughed, a cruel, insecure sound. No more hiding behind your ghost stories. Tonight we find out what you really are. He swung first. A heavy punch aimed at her temple. Elara ducked, but she didn't counter. She kept backing up, refusing to strike. Another hit, her ribs again. Pain shot through her lungs. One more recruit pinned her arms. She spat blood onto the dirt. Still she didn't fight back. Her silence only fueled Dalton further. Look at her. The deadliest sniper, can't even defend herself. Someone recorded on a phone. Others whispered from the shadows. Violence attracts an audience. Dalton kneed her in the stomach. Elara collapsed to her knees, breath gone, vision spinning. Say you're weak, he demanded. Say you don't belong here. Elara whispered, I do belong here. So do you? But not like this. Dalton's rage twisted into something darker. He grabbed a nearby shovel from the equipment rack. The recruits around him froze instantly. Dalton, no. Not with tools, one muttered. Dalton didn't care. She humiliated me. She pays for it. He raised the shovel high. Elara's instincts flared, her body screamed to defend, to strike, to survive at any cost. But she stayed still on her knees, arms loose at her sides, shaking. If I become Ghost Falcon here, she whispered to herself, I'll never stop. Dalton brought the shovel down, fast and lethal. But it never landed. A hand caught it mid-swing. The impact nearly ripped the shovel from his grip, but he held firm. His voice thundered like artillery. Drop it, recruit. Dalton stumbled backward, chest heaving. Reyes scanned the ring of men. Every one of you, fall in. Now. No one dared resist. The recruits scrambled into formation beside the barracks wall, hearts pounding, sweat dripping. Dalton tried to speak, but Reyes shut him down with a stare sharp enough to cut steel. He turned to Elara. She was still on her knees, gasping, clutching her ribs, eyes full of pain, but not from the beating. It was the pain of losing control of her life again. Reyes knelt beside her quietly, away from the watching recruits. You weren't weak tonight, he said softly. You were stronger than anyone here. But if he pushes you again, your self-control might not be enough. Elara shook as she whispered, I don't want to destroy anyone. Reyes looked toward Dalton, furious, humiliated, trembling with rage. You won't have to, he said. Because I will stop him before you do. Even if it costs me everything. But Reyes didn't know, Dalton wasn't done. Tonight only lit the fuse. The beating should have ended everything. Most bullies retreat when exposed. But Dalton wasn't fueled by strength, he was fueled by humiliation. And humiliation always searches for a target to burn. After the fight, he sat alone in the dark equipment shed, knuckles split, eyes wild. Everyone thinks she's better than me, he murmured. They think she's stronger, smarter, more marine than I'll ever be. His breathing hitched. I'll fix that. I'll fix her. The plan forming in his mind wasn't about fists anymore, it was about ending a threat. The next morning, Dalton watched her on the obstacle course, noticing every weakness she tried to hide. Her ribs were bruised. She protected her right side with every step. She couldn't lift as heavy. Every movement came with silent pain. The others saw it too, They just didn't know it was from the attack. Ilara never reported anyone. She lied and said she fell during drills. The instructors accepted it except Reyes. He knew the truth. He watched every wince, every shaky breath, and every time she refused help. Later that day during weapons cleaning, Dalton made his move. He sneaked into the armory with a stolen access badge. His hands trembled, not from fear but from rage pretending to be purpose. He tampered with a rifle scheduled for the next live fire assessment. He loosened the firing pin and increased the trigger sensitivity. If Ilara fired it, it would malfunction violently, maybe a shattered barrel, maybe worse. His logic was twisted but clear to him. The legend would fall, and he would walk free because no one would believe sabotage. While he prepared his trap, Ilara sat outside the barracks alone, hugging her knees, staring at the horizon. She wasn't thinking about Dalton, she was thinking about the little girl from the balcony years ago. She could still hear the scream. She wondered if that girl was still alive, if she grew up hating the nameless sniper who changed her world. "I don't want to hurt anyone again," Ilara whispered to the wind. "I want to be someone new." She didn't know fate was tightening behind her like a noose. When night fell, Reyes found her sitting in the dirt, half asleep, clutching her ribs to breathe. He sat beside her in silence. He didn't ask questions. Sometimes silence is the only first aid for a wounded soul. Finally he said, "Tomorrow is live fire day. Don't push yourself." Ilara forced a small nod. She didn't want pity, but she also didn't want to be alone anymore. Reyes stood to leave, but something made him pause. He looked back at her, her pain, her exhaustion, her quiet war with her past. And for the first time he felt fear. Not fear of her. Fear for her. Because tomorrow, Dalton would get another chance. And nobody, not even Reyes, knew how far he was willing to go. The early morning sky burned orange over the rifle range as recruits lined up in position. The air was tense, too quiet, like the desert itself knew something was wrong. Ilara stepped forward slowly, wincing behind a blank expression. Every breath hurt, but she refused to be pulled from training. Reyes watched her from the instructor's booth, arms crossed, eyes scanning details the way only a combat veteran would. Dalton stood farther down the line, pretending to stretch but secretly watching her every move. His heartbeat was loud in his ears. This is it. Today she falls. Recruits were assigned rifles from the rack, each one tagged for safety checks. Ilara accepted hers without looking at it. But the moment her hands touched the weapon, her instincts whispered danger. The balance felt off. The trigger was too light. Something in the metal felt wrong. Ghost Falcon, the piece of her she hated, woke up like a ghost through her bloodstream. She inhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. She scanned the bolt assembly with her thumb. Too loose. A firing pin out of alignment. This rifle wasn't an accident. Dalton watched her hesitate and panic flickered across his face. If she noticed, everything was ruined. Ilara lifted the rifle to her shoulder anyway. She wasn't sure if she was imagining it, if trauma was making her paranoid, or if someone truly meant to hurt her. She looked down the scope. The target blurred from pain, not fear. "Breathe," she whispered to herself. "Just breathe." The line instructor called out, "Fire when ready." Dalton leaned forward in anticipation, waiting for the disaster. But Reyes noticed something. Ilara's feet were angled differently. Her shoulders stiff. Her finger hovered over the trigger instead of settling. Something was wrong. He grabbed binoculars, checking her posture. His breath froze. He had seen that exact stance once before. Moments before a booby-trapped rifle exploded in a combat zone. "Ilara, don't fire," Reyes shouted. But his warning collided with another gunshot, not hers. Dalton, in his impatience, swung his rifle up and fired a split second early, trying to distract her or make her look incompetent. The sudden blast triggered her muscle memory. She flinched, lost balance, and squeezed the trigger by reflex. The sabotaged rifle detonated with a deafening crack. Metal blew backward in fragments. Ilara hit the ground hard, vision white with pain. Blood splattered the dirt beside her. Screams erupted across the range. Recruits dove for cover. Reyes sprinted faster than he ever had, knees tearing at the sand. He slid beside her, grabbing her vest, shouting her name. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed, bleeding, barely conscious, but alive. Then Reyes looked up at Dalton. And with cold certainty he realized, this wasn't bullying anymore. It was attempted murder. The chaos lingered long after the fragments of metal had been swept away. Ilara sat on the edge of the medical cot, bandages wrapped around her forearms and chest. Her body ached, but her mind ached harder. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to vanish, to disappear into the shadows where nobody could touch her again. But this time was different. Dalton's betrayal had crossed a line she couldn't ignore. He hadn't just humiliated her, he had tried to kill her. The rage coiled in her chest, tight and suffocating, reminding her of the battlefield she thought she'd left behind. Instructor Reyes paced near the cot, hands clenched. His face was hard, but worry shone through. "You okay?" he asked, though the question felt small against the desert's vast silence. Elara didn't answer. She stared at the floor, trying to control a storm that wanted to break free. She thought of the little girl overseas, of the civilians, of every life that had made her Ghost Falcon. They were memories she had tried to bury, but tonight, they fueled her. The calm mask she wore since arriving at Camp Pendleton was cracking. Dalton was in solitary now, interrogated, sweating with anger and fear. His followers were scattered, whispers of guilt and terror trailing behind them. The base knew the story had changed. She wasn't just a new recruit. She was a force, lethal, precise, and unstoppable. And yet, Elara felt hollow. Power had never been her goal. Survival had. Recognition had never mattered. She clenched her fists, knuckles white beneath the bandages. The question wasn't whether she could strike back, it was whether she wanted to become Ghost Falcon again. And she knew the answer had to come from a place far deeper than anger. Night fell. The desert wind whipped sand against the barracks windows, carrying with it the smell of gunpowder and dust. Elara rose, standing despite the bruises. Every step was deliberate, controlled, almost ceremonial. She walked past the barracks line, past the wide-eyed recruits, past Dalton sitting shackled, staring at her with a mixture of fear and defiance. The quiet was deafening. And then she spoke, calm, low, and cutting. "You tested me," she said. "You underestimated me. And now you will understand." Every eye in the room held her. Not just her comrades but Dalton, who realized too late that the game had shifted entirely. She didn't raise her fist. She didn't scream. She didn't need to. Her gaze alone was a weapon. Silence stretched long like the desert at night, until Dalton finally crumpled, shivering. The rest of the recruits understood what had happened. She had chosen the moment, the measure, and the mercy, but her message was clear. Cross her again and there would be no stopping her. Reyes watched from the doorway, pride and fear warring in his chest. Elara's body bore the scars of the fight, but her eyes, dark, unwavering, told the story he had known all along. Ghost Falcon had returned. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because sometimes, survival demands a reckoning. And Elara was ready to settle the score. Tomorrow the desert would remember her name. The sun rose like fire over Camp Pendleton, casting long shadows across the desert training ground. Every recruit knew today was different. The live-fire exercises had become more than drills, they were a stage for a reckoning. Dalton had been released from solitary under supervision, a bitter storm coiled in his chest. He refused to speak to anyone but Elara. His plan was still clear in his mind: humiliate her, reclaim his pride, prove she wasn't invincible. He didn't know the storm waiting for him. Elara stood at the edge of the range, her rifle in hand, a perfectly maintained weapon this time. Sweat trickled down her temple, and her ribs throbbed with the remnants of yesterday's beating, but her posture was iron. She didn't glance at Dalton. She didn't need to. She felt every eye on her, every heartbeat synchronized with her own controlled rhythm. Instructor Reyes stood behind her, whispering, "Remember control. Precision. Nothing else matters." She nodded, letting every ounce of restraint settle in her chest. Dalton approached, mocking with a grin, but his movements betrayed tension. "Don't chicken out," he sneered. The recruits flinched at his tone, but Elara didn't respond. Instead, she loaded her rifle, eyes scanning the distant steel targets. Her fingers grazed the stock lightly, like a conductor lifting a baton. Every muscle in her body remembered the battlefield she had survived, the missions she had completed, the lives she had saved and taken. Ghost Falcon wasn't a myth anymore. She was real. She was alive. And she was about to teach a lesson Dalton would never forget. The whistle blew. Dalton aimed, but before he could fire, Elara's voice cut through the morning air, calm yet commanding, "Stop." Confusion flashed across his face. "Or what?" he spat. She stepped aside, letting him aim at the first target. His shot went wide. Then the second. Each miss sank him deeper into panic. Elara didn't fire yet. She didn't need to. Every movement he made revealed his desperation, his arrogance crumbling in real time. The desert held its breath. Finally she raised her rifle, slow and deliberate. "Breast steady. sight aligned. Click. The first shot shattered the target at the farthest point, perfectly centered. Click. Second. Click. Third. Each shot precise, flawless. Dalton staggered backward, wide-eyed. The recruits gasped, realizing they had witnessed more than skill, they had witnessed dominance. Reyes stepped forward, voice low, satisfied. That's why you don't underestimate anyone. Dalton dropped to his knees, chest heaving, humiliation deeper than pain ever could be. Elara didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply lowered her rifle, eyes steady, her message clear. Underestimate me and you pay. The desert wind carried her authority, echoing across the range, embedding in every recruit's memory. In that moment, the past, the pain, the ghost falcon within her, all merged into a single truth. She was not the girl Dalton tried to break. She was a Marine. She was lethal. She was unstoppable. And today justice had been served. Tomorrow the desert would tell stories of her calm, her skill, and the humiliation of a bully who thought he could rewrite history. The sun dipped low behind the jagged hills of Camp Pendleton, painting the desert in crimson and gold. The day had ended, but its echoes lingered in every corner of the base. Recruits whispered as they cleaned rifles, talked in hushed tones in the barracks, and stole glances at Elara. She moved slowly, deliberately, each step measured, every movement carrying the weight of the battles she had survived and the lessons she had finally taught. Ghost Falcon was no longer a legend whispered in fear. She was real, alive, and walking among them. Dalton sat alone, head bowed, humiliated beyond repair. The echo of each flawless shot she had taken haunted him. He had believed he could break her spirit, but instead she had exposed his weakness. Reyes approached him, silent at first, then spoke quietly. You crossed a line, Dalton. Not just a Marine, not just a recruit. You tried to take someone's life. There are consequences. Dalton's shoulders slumped. He no longer had the arrogance to argue. Every inch of pride had been stripped away, leaving only the bitter taste of failure. Elara watched from the far edge of the range, ribs still aching, body still bruised, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had faced her past, her fears, and the shadow of Ghost Falcon that she had tried to bury. The girl from the balcony, the civilians, the battles overseas, they had shaped her, forged her into something neither Dalton nor the desert could touch. And yet, for the first time in a long time, she felt the possibility of peace. Reyes came beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. You did more than survive today, he said softly. You reminded everyone why respect isn't earned through noise, but through strength, skill, and integrity. Elara nodded, letting the words sink in. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Not pride. Not vengeance. Completion. The other recruits began filing past, silent acknowledgement in their eyes. Some bowed their heads, some offered timid nods. All understood what had happened and none would forget. Dalton remained in the shadow of the barracks, a reminder that arrogance and cruelty never outshine mastery and courage. But even he learned something, the hard way, that underestimating someone can cost more than pride. It can cost dignity. Elara finally walked to the ridge overlooking the desert, the wind tugging gently at her hair. She closed her eyes, listening to the quiet hum of the world around her. She had won, not through rage but through precision, restraint, and the control that only Ghost Falcon could command. The past would always be part of her, but it no longer controlled her. She was free. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, leaving the sky in deep shades of violet, Elara whispered to the wind, almost as if the desert itself had ears, I am here. I am strong. I am enough. And in that silence, the desert seemed to echo back in agreement. The story of the rookie, the bully, and the Marine Corps' deadliest sniper had ended. Not with chaos. Not with destruction. But with justice, resilience, and a hero finally at peace.